And speaking of very interesting, Anna Bright, but I saw her make a post the other day. I saw her make a post, and I've been thinking about the same thing for a while. She said something like something that shows the evolution of the game is that how many ATPs come back. And about a month ago, I've gotten good at defending ATP, or like relatively. I think a lot of players have. It's not the craziest thing to reset an ATP, but I've actually was thinking the other day, like to start hitting wide dinks in order to bait them into ATPs, and just because like once they're in an ATP, they usually think like psychologically, like, oh, this point's over, and then the other player is going to come cover in the middle, and you have all this space open on the other side. So it's almost like let's bait some ATPs, but in a very specific way, and I don't actually know what way that is yet. Like it needs to be, I don't know, it needs to be a ball that they need to hit up on a little more. So it can't be like the dink needs to be kind of low, I think. Or I don't know, actually, maybe then it would skid. But the point is that you hit a wide dink and then you get them out of position, then you take advantage of their positional disadvantage. And I think that's an interesting thing that maybe at some point will come, but it happens all the time. We just don't usually set it up,
Yeah, so like offensively setting up around the posts for your opponent to draw them, basically create a 2-on-1 situation.
Basically create a 2-on-1
situation. So the risk is, basically like,
yeah, go ahead.
I've been doing this once a game, maybe.
Yeah.
Just so it accomplishes two different things, right? So I typically do it when I have a dead dink that's relatively wide on either the backhand side, near the sideline, or the forehand side. And naturally, when you have that shot, the diagonal player is going to start crashing towards the middle.
Right.
And so if you hit a really aggressive cross-court dink, you understand, yes, they're going to get there probably, and they're going to be able to hit an ATP. But are they going to be able to hit a good enough ATP?
Yeah.
So it accomplishes two things. A, you might be 55% favored to actually win that point, but it's not even necessarily about that point where you gave them the ATP. It's about every other point where you have that same situation where they're slightly more hesitant to crash and cover that middle, right? So it's a weird, and I think that's actually somewhere that this game is going. This game is going to have more and more game theory as we continue to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, do you think it would be more? Let's say you're playing two righties, and do you think it'd be more beneficial to which player should hit the ATP to maximize your advantage? Should it be the player hitting the ATP with their backhand, the left side player? So then you have a backhand ATP and a backhand middle coverage, or do you think you should do it on the right side so you could cross it back over to the left side player's backhand, so their attack might be slightly weaker, or their counter might be slightly weaker?
I would say generally forehand ATPs are struck harder or more aggressively, or at least more scary.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the forehand ATP is going to end the point
a higher percentage
more times than the backhand ATP, right? Like guys get a forehand ATP, and there some players are just slapping it, and like the point's over, win or lose, it's over.
Yeah.
Right? They're just gonna hit it hard. The backhand ATP is, unless you're giving it over to Connor Garnett, most people aren't slapping it the same way, and so I would say, I think that giving it to there's less risk giving it to the left side player that's going to be hitting their backhand over there.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. I'm gonna start messing around that a little more. But your partner needs to be on the same. Like, if your partner's not good,
your partner has to be on the same page. And you've got to set them up well enough where the person is really what I see as the key there is, if you're going to give up an ATP, you have to make sure that the player hitting it is not only moving sideways but also moving backwards.
Yeah.
If they're slightly if they're angling backwards to get to the ATP, they're not going to be able to hit it quite as hard. And then also they're going to be off the line for when you're playing 2-on-1.
Yeah.
So I try to give it only when I can make the person move backwards and sideways to hit this ATP.
That's good. Yeah. If it's too far back, or not too far, but if it's backward enough, then you can pull out that Yates,
the Ernie
ATP.
Yeah, exactly.
Pablo did it in Utah. I saw it live. And it was so good. He was so casual about it. It was perfect.
That's a badass shot. That is an unbelievably badass shot.
Yeah.
Okay, so Proton pulled a fast one on me. They invited us and a bunch of other creators out to their headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona. I played with the Proton that day. That was maybe like 2 months ago, and I have not stopped playing with it since. So I've obviously tried a ton of paddles. The Proton, to me, it's just different. They say a lot about the durability, the fact that like Andre Deescu was using it for like 3 months in a row, which is unheard of, especially for pros who are changing their paddles like every day. But you just don't have to replace these things. The longevity, the grit, the structure of the paddle, it just holds up. If crazy pop, insane control. So Proton seems to be one of those brands that came out of nowhere in the past year, and now they're one of the most popular paddles, selling out constantly. I just mentioned that Andre Daescu plays with them, but Caitlin Christian, Donald Young, Travis Rettenmeyer, CJ Klinger, the list goes on. All these pros are dominating the courts with paddles that leverage carbon fiber technology from baseball bats for exceptional sound and spin. Following the quick sellout of their Series 1, Proton's Series 2 paddles are now on the scene, claiming to be the softest on the market, providing top-notch control and great feel, winning a lot of medals at PPA events at the 3.0 and 4.0 level. Find Proton paddles exclusively through Pickleball Central. Use our code, THEDINK, to save $25 on your Proton paddle from pickleballcentral.com. That's all caps, THEDINK, for $25 off.
The PPA has been messing around with server rules. Basically, a quick history was at the beginning of this year, they created a provisional rule, which was in effect from January through mid-August or early August, which you had to release the ball from your hip height, and you could not toss it up, and then you still had to swing upwards at this serve. That got really, really difficult to enforce. It was basically unenforced, and then in the Kansas City tournament, it was completely unenforced. They reverted back to USA Pickleball rules, and that was the day of our mixed match, and I was like back to serving real high.
Your serve, I liked your serve at the time. I thought it was a great challenge for me to try to return it.
Yeah, so we had a couple of weeks under USAP rules from Kansas City through Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, we obviously played, Declan and I obviously played that final. They implemented a new rule where it's a reserve if it's not 100% certain whether it's a fault, or 100% certain whether it is a legal serve. And so we had the fiasco where there were like 10 or 12 different serves that were just reserves, and like, all right, that's ridiculous. And then the next week is the Atlanta PPA, and on Monday they announced the following rules. The ball must be released downward from the waist area. A drop from the hand may not be tossed upwards, but can incur minimal and natural lift, up to 1 ball length. The swing on the serve must be underhand, around 45 degrees or less, and the paddle must clearly travel in a low to high direction. Serves where either the ball is tossed too high on the release or the swing was not clearly in a low to high motion will result in a service warning and reserve. Each player is allowed 1 service warning per match. Subsequent violations will result in a fault. Do you know what that means?
It's pretty clear and straightforward.
Ben, explain it to me. I'd love to know.
No. I remember I didn't play the beginning of the year because I was injured at the time, but I was watching, and then when I came back and started playing, they were still doing the, like, you have to have your hand on top of the ball. I do remember. I actually didn't think. I thought it was pretty clear on that. I thought you got to keep it here. I didn't think they just weren't enforcing it, is what I was hearing, right? But it didn't. It actually seemed like the clearest way. Like, just drop it with your hand on top of the ball. Everybody seemed to, like, when I was watching early, everyone seemed to be doing it fine, and there wasn't anything crazy. I mean, James was still serving hard as crap, even doing it that way. So that was one. What was that hard to enforce because you were playing at the time? That didn't feel like it was.
Yeah, in theory, no. But what started to happen was what you naturally do on a serve when you're trying to hit it the same way that, or like hard. And I'm sure it's probably one of the 7 tips of your video. I didn't watch. I'm not a subscriber. No, I'm just kidding. I am a subscriber, but I didn't watch. You use your legs, right? You drive from your back leg through your front.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, you got to get down low into a squatting position. And so what was happening was players were releasing the ball and they're moving their body around, and you really couldn't tell where the ball is actually being released. If you are exiting a squat, let's put my hand here. If you're exiting a squat while you're also releasing the ball, like, this ball would be tossed upwards. And where the waist is really hard to tell when you're at an angle, or when you've got a long shirt, whatever. So the issues there were telling whether the ball was actually released downwards and whether it was actually at the waist.
Yeah. That makes sense. It is tough. I mean, I actually remember too, a long time ago, I was recording some footage and Dekel was serving, and I recorded it in slow mo and I watched it, and like 4 out of 4 were legal. Like he figures out how to do it legally, but it kind of looks illegal. And I think when
it looks very illegal until you really dive into it.
Until you dive into it, and so like one of my thoughts too is because the refs are going to be looking so much at the toss, we should just put our feet all over that line and step in like 6 inches. They'll never see it. But
there we go.
You know that it's hard. The refs have a lot to look at. I honestly don't know the answer. You're smarter than me on that. You could just go to the drop serve, I guess, but I'm sure there's a way to manipulate that. But I will say, like, bigger picture thought on serving in general. I mean, you had the best chainsaw serve. You're the one that created it originally, or did you get it from somebody else?
I didn't create the spin serve, but I created the chainsaw serve. Morgan Evans created the spin serve.
Yeah.
I popularized the chainsaw.
I mean, the spin serve was hard to do. I ended up never even learning how to do it. I like tried a couple times. I'm like, this is freaking hard. I'm not even going to spend time on this, right? And then eventually it got outlawed. But I don't know. We're like punishing only the best servers because still plenty of people with whatever rule are going to serve it really soft. I do that all the time. I get nervous and I just serve it soft. You know, so at the end of the day, we end up just punishing the best servers to try to make it equal. And I'm fine with the chainsaw, the spin serve. I think it's creative. It's like the 3-point line. Like we're just adding things to the game, and just because a lot of people started looking silly and people were like twisting their ankles, I'll default to your thoughts on it. I align with how you think about it.
Honestly, I'm kind of okay with any rule that's actually enforceable. And so right now, what my suggestions are. Look, I made this tweet, and I hate to say I told you so, but I said, you know, when this first came out, I can't wait to see PPA referees attempt to enforce some of the vaguest wording most vague wording I've ever seen in a rule. We literally have words used in there, minimal and natural lift. What is natural lift is up to 1 ball length. I don't know how you're gonna. Maurice the Grease had a great tweet about that. He said, "I also use 1 ball length as a unit of measurement." But and then. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie,